This is pretty much PBC's turn to be able to really shine a very big light on themselves in terms of DAZN, Turkey Al Sheik, and having these absolute stacked cards that they've been presenting ever since Turkey Al Sheik has been in the business of dealing with DAZN and making those absolutely superstar worthy cards that we're probably going to be getting this weekend coming up, that being David Benavidez versus Anthony Yard, and as well as the UFC. The UFC has already been in business making an absolutely tremendous stacked main card on what they've been doing, and as well as the end of the year with their pay-per-view card as well. And usually Amazon, PBC, Prime, a lot of dudes has been leaving the stable of Al Heyman and PBC and been going off and doing their own things, or been making business deals that usually they haven't been doing beforehand, and going to the other side and really trying to be able to establish their name more and get into other bigger fights, because obviously other stablemates are not really in the rankings of PBC as of right now. I don't know if their numbers are doing tremendous or if things are going the way that they need to be able to go for them forward. But yeah, that's just a little soliloquy about PBC and Amazon and really what they've been doing so far. They haven't really showcased a lot of fights, and a lot of the fight nights that they've been putting on has been very sparsely out there here and there, and as well as the pay-per-views have been stacked usually a little bit. There's like 3 or 4 cards that have some notable names, but really haven't been absolutely price of admission, in my honest opinion, since the pay-per-view model, in my opinion, has been dying. But this card, it is stacked. Since the Keith Thurman versus Sebastian Fundora fiasco went down, and Sebastian Fundora pulled out because I believe he had a bruised wrist or a fracture in his wrist or something like that, and they're probably going to get that rebooked in for early next year. I'm thinking January, February for that matchup on another card that they have promised, which is rumored to be Manny Pacquiao versus Rolly Romero. Um, a lot of the fights that were on that undercard is going to be presented on this card, which was going to be its own separate, different type of card, about maybe a month, maybe 3 weeks out from time for PBC. So they spaced it out a little bit. Usually, again, like I said earlier, they've been putting out these cards very sparingly because they're trying to be able to stack with all these fighters and all these cards, and instead of just having like 12 to 20 fight cards and pushing them out there and having just one good headliner and just having a lot of good prospects underneath there, which usually what boxing has been done beforehand. They're just going to the model of what now Turkey Al Sheik and the UFC has been doing, where they absolutely just stack talent and bringing you forefront with a few cards here and there throughout the year, but you know that they're doing that their own business. And speaking of the fights that are on this card, I've already made predictions on them. I'm going to be dropping the link below in this video, so that way you guys can be able to tune in to a deeper dive, in-depth type of prediction. Usually you guys have been loving it, and you guys have been absolutely doing tremendous road work for that prediction video that I made quite some time ago, that being Keith Thurman versus Sebastian Fundora. I really appreciate all the support that you guys have been pushing out for me there without that. And really just to go over and really give you a brief synopsis of what I've gone through with the fights that I've already predicted on that card, to put it on this card, because this card already has these fights on here. We have Isaac Lucero versus Jose Rayo Valenzuela. I think, if I remember correctly, Lucero is an undefeated fighter. Has been, punishing some of the older veterans that have been in that division, and Valenzuela is coming off that absolute beating that he suffered against Gary Antoine Russell. I think this is a bounce back win for Jose Rayo Valenzuela, where he get back into winning ways, put his name back into contendership, and hopefully be able to get into big contender fights once again, or really prop himself up and getting his stock up, probably with a knockout or something else for him to be able to move on forward with. As well as Jesus Alejandro Ramos versus Shane Mosley Jr. Mosley Jr. is coming off that win against Daniel Jacobs. Jose Alejandro Ramos has been very, very active this year, 2025. I think this is his 4th fight this year, if I'm being correctly asserted on that one. But all the fights that he's been in have been really kind of just fights to be able to put him over the edge. not real huge tests. He's been getting a lot of knockouts. He's been really running roughshod through the competition that he's been going through after that loss that he suffered against Erickson Lubin. So I think Jesus Alejandro Ramos gets the job done again against Shane Mosley Jr. And another fight. Obviously, that was supposed to be the co-main event, but I think that will be the future fight on this card, the third fight on this card. That being O'Shea Foster versus Stephen Fulton. I think it's going to be very competitive. O'Shea Foster has really good skills and talent. I don't think that he supersedes that over against a guy like Stephen Fulton. I think Stephen Fulton, when the shoe foots the bill, I think he really has the job done and really can outgun and make O'Shea Foster look in there very limited in terms of his game of what he can be able to do so. But I don't count out Foster. I do that he's going to be on his game. I think it's going to be very competitive, but I do think that Fulton definitely pulls away for a decision. So that's pretty much just a synopsis of what I've already made in my other prediction video, that being the Keith Thurman versus Sebastian Fundora video. And now to be able to go on the fights that were originally planned on this card. And we start off with the first fight, and that being Frank Martin finally making his return to the ring versus Rances Bartolome. Rances Bartolome, that being a Cuban veteran that's been in the game for quite some time. He's been there, he's done that. He's had a draw so far against Robert Eastern Jr., who was kind of a guy that was, really on the up and up and an undefeated guy, potentially being into stardom, but then got dominated by Mikey Garcia. He got KO'd by Gary Antoine Russell, but looking back on that one, even though Antoine Russell has some of his stinkers and can be able to lower his level compared to the competition that he's gone against beforehand, he really just ran through Rances Bartholomew. And he's also coming off a loss against Jose Carlos Ramirez, where Ramirez is a good fighter, but as of recently, he kind of lost off his sting. He's not really winning the bigger name fights as of right now as he has beforehand, but he did get a win over Rances Bartholomew. Both of these guys have been out for quite some time. I think Bartholomew hasn't fought since April of last year. That's for sure. A year and a half out since then. And Frank Martin hasn't been in there since that KO loss against Gervonta Tank Davis. Another year and a half layoff for him as well. Even a little bit shorter than what Rances Bartholomew has done, but he's been out of the game, out of sight, out of mind. Really just laying on top of that paycheck that he got against Gervonta Tank Davis. But he has shown, some promise. I think Frank Martin is kind of one of those dudes that when he goes up against a higher level top tier competition, he's going to lose. He might get knocked out. He reminds me quite a bit of an Erickson Lubin or the likes of an Anthony Yard, where I'm not going to say in terms of entertainment factor he's up there with those guys, but he can get good wins. He would have some respectable wins on his resume, but again, in terms of the top tier end guys that he's probably going to go against in the future of his career, if he continues on boxing, if that is, he'll have his win streaks, he'll do what he has to do, and then he'll get matched up against with somebody else, and then he'll eventually get knocked out. But in this matchup, though, with Frank Martin against Rances Bartholomew, I think this is a get-back fight for Frank Martin to be able to get back on track, get into winning ways, shake off the cobwebs of that KO, and really get back into winning ways and winning formula, so that way he can be able to be that type of fighter that I mentioned beforehand, similar likely to an Erickson Lubin, an Anthony Yard, respectable, veteran, experience, been in the game, but not really top tier quality, if we're being quite honest. And now moving on to what I believe is the co-main event on this fight, and that being a banger. And trust me, I know bangers. We have DAZN Lara versus Janibek Alim Kanuli, or as maybe pronounced Janibek, instead of it being a Jazh. Really, DAZN Lara has been there and done that. One of the top tier and type of wily, crafty, sturdy vets that has been in the game, has been there, done that, done it twice over as of right now. Early on in his career, having that southpaw stance, having that Cuban style, really just relying a lot on his slick head movement, defense, being a great counter puncher, having a great jab, just doing enough, having good accuracy as well, not relying so much on the power, but really just being a great technical boxer. Has losses on his resume like Canelo Alvarez, which was very controversial. A lot of people, even to this day, still think that Lara should have got that win over Canelo. and as well had the absolute war of attrition against Jared Hurd when Jared Hurd was in his prime, and that fight was an absolute just top tier fight of the year. I think it was fight of the year that matchup happened. And ever since then, ever since I believe he's had that one loss against Jared Hurd, I think that's his last loss in his resume. I know he has a draw in there, but after that, he's been on quite a revival of his career. I mean, he is on a 6-fight win streak as of right now, and he's reinvented his game of being kind of a KO artist. Now, the guys that he's gone against, like Gary O'Sullivan, Danny Garcia, which was his most recent last time outers that he's gone against, he's been putting dudes away. His power has been very effective, even at his older age. Maybe that later dad's type of power got into his body, and he really just uses it now to his advantage, knowing that he can be able to get these guys out of there. And now, with relying that and also mixing in with the Cuban style, maybe it might not be the greatest thing for him, especially going against a guy like Janibek, because really going in there, having your ego and your pride just on 100, and really just having this enthusiasm and really knowing that you can be now a KO artist and you leave yourself open for quite some moments against a guy like Janibek might be the last thing that you want to be able to do. So I think Lara is going to be going in there with his mind clear, more defensive style, more of that Cuban style again, but still having that KO power that he still has been relying on. And it really is just very interesting to be able to see that, how just reinvigorated that he's had, and just completely been a very different fighter than what he's done in the beginning years in his prime, I would want to be able to say, of his boxing career. And for Janibek is this big, I really don't even want to be able to say prospect, but a dude that has been on the rise, has been kind of hiding in the shadows. A lot of people have been ducking. A lot of people don't want to be able to do it. High risk, not a lot of big reward for Janibek. This is his first time ever to be on a big stage. I know that he's been with Top Rank and has fought on those cards as well on ESPN and ESPN Plus. But this is a big, big stage for him now, really to be able to showcase his talent and really his power. He's a southpaw version of a Gennady Golovkin, also as them being also fellow countrymen from Kazakhstan as well. Janibek is a more modern version and more of a fluid version of a Gennady Golovkin, where Golovkin was kind of robotic with his fundamentals and technique, which was also, very perfect. But I think Janibek is a little bit more, again, like I said, fluid. He can be able to let things a little bit more loose. But Janibek, man, Janibek is in his prime. He hasn't had any real notable wins on his resume, him being an undefeated fighter as well. The biggest name on his resume is Steven Butler. And recently, the last few guys that he's just defeated, the last 3 names, have been undefeated guys. And again, there haven't really been big names on his resume, but I think that there's that for a reason, because nobody really wants to be able to match up against him. And not only that, he's a huge, and I mean huge, 160 pounder. I mean, he uses that weight cut and that weight division for his advantage for sure. In this one, though, I think it's going to be very interesting. First time in the big stage for Janibek. He might have a little, twinkle in his eyes because, the lights may be shining too bright a little bit. It might have, big fight nervousness. You never really know. But Lara has been there. He's done that. He's been in there with the best, pretty much the best in the division in there. But I'm going to go with Janibek. I'm going to go with Janibek by KO. I think this is going to be highly entertaining. I think we're going to get back and forth action. I think Lara is in there to win 100%. He's always in there to win for sure, but I think he's in there to be able to really say that he's really one of the best of his generation and still pushing on forward to be able to be now in this middleweight division where he really fills out with his frame and using his power and having that now in his mind that he can be able to knock people out, wanting to use that for his effect, but going against a guy that's in his prime, really ready to be able to shine and be able to go on forward. I think that this is going to be very entertaining, but I just think that Janibek, especially with his physicality and how big he is just going to be too much for Erislandy Lara. So yeah, I have Janibek winning by KO, but in a very, very entertaining matchup. And now moving on to the main event, and we got Lamont Roach versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz. This matchup to me seems to be like with pundits, critics, and casual fans and hardcore fans alike, where this is the fight for everybody to be able to see, with obviously this being the headliner and this being everywhere plastered with the two faces, that being Lamont Roach and Isaac Pitbull Cruz, to see if Lamont Roach is a star, if he is a star in the making, that they can be able to push on forward and really have a big flag bearer. And that matchup against Gervonta Tank Davis was just not a flash in the pan. He's just not a bad style matchup for Gervonta Tank Davis. He's actually a really, really great fighter to be able to go in there, and it's going to be a tough out, or he's going to be able to create himself into being that top earner and top guy in the division, especially with a win. If he gets a win over a guy like Isaac Pitbull Cruz, who has had some losses on his resume, especially recently, but even as then is a fan favorite, has the Mexican crowd behind him, and really just displaying that in the matchup against a guy like Gervonta Tank Davis was really just a fan favorite from there, and giving him the best fight and matchup that Tank could be able to handle. And while Tank had to be able to rely on his boxing and obviously broke his hand in that one, Isaac Pitbull Cruz is hard, very hard to be able to get out of there. But Lamont Roach, I think this is all on his shoulders. There's going to be a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of standing on him. And to be able to prove that he can be able to be that guy, or if not, he's, again, like I said earlier, just a flash in the pan. A guy that just had a great night, was there looking for to be able to get a win, and a very controversial draw, which on the rewatching of me having that and putting it on this channel, I did believe that Lamont Roach was the rightful winner for that matchup and should have got the win. Boxing and its politics here or there, it is what it is. But Lamont Roach, man, he really showed a lot. And if that really is him, and that wasn't just a absolutely picture perfect night that he pitched in that matchup against Gervonta Tank Davis, then he really is a player, and a serious player, especially in this division now. To be able to really worry about. I mean, Lamont Roach has it all. He has great toughness, has a really good chin, has good boxing ability and skill, really good jab, good counter puncher, doesn't have tremendous speed, doesn't have dynamic power, can't really to be able to punish you and put you out of there, but has a style that is very methodical, very withdrawn, and can eventually just wear on you. And I think that's kind of what happened in that matchup against Gervonta Tank Davis. But with Isaac Pitbull Cruz, you're knowing what you're getting with him. He doesn't really change up his style. He's a fan favorite. Coming off the losses that he's had, I mean, he has the loss against Tank Davis. He's had most recently the loss against Jose Rayo Valenzuela, where he got completely outboxed in that matchup against him. But he's coming off 2 wins as of right now. The unanimous decision against Angel Ferio, where they were supposed to be able to get that rematch against each other earlier this year, but he got a nice victory over Omar Gomez, where he completely dominated him in that matchup. But Angel Ferio in that matchup against Isaac Pitbull Cruz was an absolute war. I mean, back and forth action that was just action packed. It was beautiful. It was chef kiss. It was exactly what the fight fans want, and that's absolute violence from between two guys that just want to be able to get things in there. But in this matchup, though, I think we're going to get back to boxing. Maybe we can be able to see more layers from Isaac Pitbull Cruz. I mean, he showed some in that Gervonta Tank Davis matchup. But against Jose Rayo Valenzuela, a longer limb, taller kind of guy, a leaner guy, he was able to get out of the way, really use his movement, use his boxing very effectively, and just did what he wanted to be able to do with him. And Lamont Roach, while he's not the biggest dude, is kind of in that similar build of Jose Rayo Valenzuela. Not as big and as long and has the reach advantage that Jose Valenzuela does have and use for his effect in his boxing game. But similarly, like that, I do think that that's what Lamont Roach is probably going to do. I think Lamont Roach is probably going to school Isaac Pitbull Cruz, make Pitbull Cruz look like an absolute amateur out there, and just teach him a boxing lesson. I don't think that he's going to knock out Pitbull Cruz. Pitbull Cruz has an absolute disgusting chin. Putting him down is you have to throw a head kick at this dude's head to be able to knock him out. And they're not using head kicks in boxing from what I remember. So, yeah, I think that Lamont Roach is going to be able to get the job done, boxing very effectively, very well, very intelligently as well. I do think that Pitbull Cruz will have his moments. They'll have their moments where they'll be in the pocket. They'll be scrapping. It'll be entertaining for the majority of that part. But for the entirety of the fight, I think that Lamont Roach is just going to get the job done. He's just too good, especially with his boxing. And while he isn't as dynamic and as explosive and as powerful as Gervonta Tank Davis, I do think that in terms of his skill and his style compared to a guy, and especially in terms of his length and reach, like I said earlier before, I think would just be useful to his advantage for him to be able to just box Eastside Pitbull Cruz head off. So yeah, those are my predictions for this fight card, stacked card, 6 fights that if you're a boxing fan, you've been watching and paying attention to PBC and their pay-per-views to be able to tune in for sure. So like this video. If you obviously like this video, comment your opinions on what you think about this fight card. Who do you have winning on this fight card? If you have some underdogs, usually in this one I kind of go with the favorites because usually they go out there and win respectfully. If you see anything differently, if you want to be able to chop that up in the comment section below, do that. Let's do that. Let's do it right now. And subscribe. You're a boxing fan. You're a PBC fan. You love this content. You need this content. You need it today. You need it tomorrow. You need it every day. And I got it here for you, baby. Thank you guys again for watching again. And peace.